Hello and welcome back to this AWS course. We're currently in section 5 and this is lesson 3. In this lesson we're going to look at the CDK code necessary to deploy Cognito. A quick recap: in lesson 1 of this section we looked at Cognito in action. We saw our application running and logging into Cognito. And then in lesson 2 we did a deep dive into OAuth and all the steps that are involved in authentication code flow with Pixie. So if you'd like to get hold of the source code, just visit richardbraycourses.co.uk and you'll find there's a repo for each section of the course. So just click on this button and you'll be taken to this repo here. And in fact, the source code for this is in lesson 1. These two lessons just contain documentation. So just open up the lesson 1 folder and all the code for this lesson's here. Okay, so with that, let's get started. So this is the Cognito stack code. It's called by cognito.ts. So it's completely independent, as you can see. And we'll walk through the code, but just to have a quick high-level view of it, we create a user pool domain, a user pool client, and then a managed login branding. Now, I've actually drawn a picture to explain these things. So you may have different apps wanting different login screens. So imagine you've got one web application and you've got one mobile application. Well, the idea is that you have one Cognito user pool, which is essentially a database of users. And this has a domain that you can connect to it through. But you can have multiple, what are called Cognito app clients. At first, when I heard this term, I thought it was a client, but actually it's an endpoint for a client application. So in this diagram, I've imagined we have two app client endpoints, both with a different ID. So you see this one's got ID 101, this is 1234. And this is designed for the web app in that it has a login screen that would be suitable for a web app. Whilst this app client over here has got a different login screen. It's called a managed branding, and this would be suitable for a mobile application. So then I've shown in red those 4 lines of code we just looked at. We create a user pool, which is our database of users. The user pool client, in our app, we're only going to have one. Then a Cognito domain. And then finally, we create these managed login brandings. So now if we go back to the source code, this should all make a bit more sense. So the first thing we're doing over here is we're actually reading a parameter from SSM, which has already been stored by the CloudFront stack. So when CloudFront deployed, a new URL would have been generated for where the website is located, and it stored it in this SSM parameter here. So we go and get hold of it, and then we create this array of callback URLs. This localhost 5173 is when we're running locally in Vite. And this website distribution URL will have the CloudFront website address when we're running in production. And then notice both of them have this /callback after. This is the page in our React application that users are redirected to after authentication is complete. We covered this in some detail in the previous lesson. If you need more information, just go there and all will be explained. Okay, so we've set up our array of allowable callback URLs, and similarly we have an array of allowable logout URLs, which is essentially the same as this array except without the /callback on the end. So after logout, the user's essentially just routed to the home page of the application. And once we've set those up, we can get on with the job of actually creating our CDK constructs. And the first is the user pool, and we can see that there's a removal policy here of destroy. This is only because we're using it in development. This means if you destroy the stack, then also destroy the entire database of users. So this would be very foolish in a production site, but it works well for development where we want to build and destroy. And then a few other properties about the sign-in alias, whether to verify the email address, and whether self-sign-up is enabled or not. Now, self-sign-up is quite a big deal because generally your Cognito login page is open to the entire world. So if you allow self-sign-up, that means anyone who knows the address can go along and create themselves an account. Now, this is fine if you're Spotify, where you actually allow anyone to sign up with an account. But if you're using this for a sort of closed user group of your customers, you would typically say, no, self-sign-up isn't allowed, and you would build yourself a create user screen, or you can, as a last resort, actually go into the management console, as we saw in the first lesson. But anyway, it's important that you make the right decisions about this self-sign-up. Okay, so once we've created our user pool, we then set about creating a domain prefix. So this is the prefix on the Cognito URL, and we have quite a bit of flexibility over this. There are a few rules within the region. This must be unique. It's limited to 63 characters, but within reason, you're given quite a lot of flexibility about your own domain prefix that users can connect to your Cognito portal with. Then the user pool client, as we saw in the diagram, you can have multiple app clients, but I'm just creating one here, and notice that I'm saying flow is the authorization code grant. So this is in line with OAuth 2.1. The difference between OAuth 2.0 and 2.1 is that OAuth 2.1 narrowed down the number of available flows to just this authorization code grant. You can see that we've also got this scopes property. So these are essentially the permissions that can be granted to the calling application on this app client endpoint. And OpenID is the most important one. This essentially says that an ID token can be returned to this access point. We covered ID tokens in the last lesson, but this is fundamental to identifying the user. And then the scope of email is being added. So this says that the ID token can contain the email address, which is precisely what our front end needs. Callback URLs we've already seen up here. So this is essentially a security system that ensures that once authentication is complete, the user will be redirected to a place that we're expecting, which in our case is the callback page of our React application, either running in Vite or in production. And similarly, logout URLs exactly the same. After logout is complete, you will be routed to Vite or the production homepage. Okay, so manage login branding. Not a lot to say about this at this point. We can see that there is a user pool and a app client reference here, and it says use Cognito provided values. So this is basically saying use the default login screen appearance. In another lesson, we will look at how to dress up the login screen and make it a bit fancier. But for now, we're just going to use the default login screen here. And then after that, we just save some values in SSM parameters, and we build a Cognito domain, and we store the Cognito domain. We store the client ID. Now this is going to be very important because if we just go back here, when a client connects to the domain, it has to specify which app client it actually wants to talk to. So we're going to save the ID into an SSM parameter. We'll fish out this ID and use it in the environment variables for our application. We'll see that in the next lesson. And similarly, the user pool ID, this is also going to be necessary when our React application wants to make a connection. It needs to be in possession of this ID. Okay, so that completes the CDK code. I'll bring this lesson to a close here, and then in the next lesson we'll actually walk through the React application side of things. So I'll see you there.